It's now my absolute pleasure to introduce Fiona Patton as our closing speaker. I used to see Fiona sitting at World AIDS Day memorials and AIDS candlelight memorials, and I used to wonder who this person was. And then somebody said, "Oh, that's Fiona Patton." And I said, "Really? What's she doing here?" So I found out a little bit later that Fiona is a long-term activist, an educator, and now we all know her as a legislator. But she has never lost her community activism. Her career began in the 1980s as an AIDS educator with the ACT's sex worker advocacy group called WISE. She also held positions on the board of the AIDS Action Council of ACT and with the Australian Federations of AIDS Organisations as a committee member. She was also a member of the ACT... My goodness, we've got a massive burst of flame there to complement our candles, of course. Also as a member of the ACT Attorney General's Sex Industry Committee. Fiona's decision to run for political office came after 20 years of lobbying for the rights of small business, for sexual health organisations, for sexual freedoms and censorship reforms. Best known as the CEO of Australia's national lobby group, the Eros Foundation, and now as a Victorian member of the Legislative Council. Having attended so many candlelight memorials and World AIDS Day services, I believe that it was about time we heard from Fiona as one of the early activists. Please join us in welcoming Fiona.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's a real honour to be speaking here today. And in reflecting about this, and I'd like to thank VAC and Living Positive Victoria and all the activists who are here today and all the elders, although I'm probably considered one of them now, but both the activists of the past and of the present. And I, in thinking about today, I thought, it's 2018. It's 30 years since I went to the first funeral for a friend who died of AIDS, and I went to many more. And I loved hearing the choir sing "True Colours" because that was the song that was played at that first funeral that I went to. But I went to many more. And as was mentioned, I was involved in the AIDS Council in those early days. I also was part of establishing some of the needle exchange programs in those early days. And in those early days, it was frightening, but God, we actually had a lot of fun as well. And I think it was because we didn't know what was coming the day after. So we celebrated life in a way that was quite different. It might have also because I was young as well. But at the AIDS Council, we set up a fund called the Trevor Daley Fund, which we all called To Die For, because it was for HIV and AIDS people with HIV and AIDS, and we provided them with money for whatever they wanted. In fact, I remember one guy coming to us and asking for money for heroin, and it just didn't quite look right on the books. But we said, look, pay your come in, give us your electricity bill and any other bill, and then we'll give you the money and you can spend it for whatever you like. And that was kind of the attitude then. But it was also a time when our governments were actually quite brave. We established AIDS councils, we established sex worker rights organisations, we established drug user rights organisations. We did some really great work. We were brave. Australia was at the lead. And I think that's why we have been so successful continuing on in this campaign. But in those days, we didn't even recommend that you got tested because we knew the stigma and the discrimination of being tested. For the sex worker community, it also meant you're out of a job. Sadly, today, for the sex worker community, being positive also means you have to leave your work. And that's something that I think we need to change and that I will change. But we've seen, and hearing Heather speak, and that Heather has children. Now, back in the early 90s, when a woman became HIV positive, it was never thought that they would have children, ever, because for fear of transmitting the virus onto their child, or for fear that they wouldn't live long enough to raise that child. So it was just with such wonderful optimism to hear Heather's story and to hear Heather saying, "I'm just boring." Heather, you are far from boring. We are changing and we are progressing, and I think Heather really indicated that. You know, back in the day when sex workers sort of first heard about HIV, we started using condoms, and we were probably some of the first people that really started getting active and educating ourselves around HIV and AIDS. We led that challenge. We became the sex educators of the straight white men that were our clients. We saw the first year that I was in Parliament, and I happened to be sitting in the chair, we saw the overturning of Section 19A, which criminalised, treated someone who had transmitted HIV in a more serious way than if they had murdered them with a knife. And it was outrageous, and it was appalling legislation, and I am so proud that Victorian Parliament overturned Section 19A, and I actually got to read that bill into law on that day. But as Andy showed us, we still need to be brave, and the stigma is still with us, and we have to fight that, and we have to overturn that discrimination. And with the wonderful, powerful voices of Andy and Heather, that will happen. And not to forget Bill, who that was one of the most poignant, beautiful stories. And you know, I reflect on going down to the beach and with friends who are no longer with me today, and I remember those people. And today is that day that I remember them. I remember them every day, but today is a really special day, and that memorial where we reflect. But we look with optimism. We look with optimism at new treatments. We look at optimism of undetectable virus. I look around and I think, oh my God, for the first time, you know, my friends who have HIV will be going to my funeral. I won't be going to theirs. And that gives me great pleasure. So we must continue to advocate. We must continue to remember. I will continue to fight stigma. I will continue to fight for greater treatment, access to treatment for us all. But, you know, we can't stop believing, as the song says. So thank you very much.